Hi there guys, it's Mike from MCQ Bushcraft here, and welcome to episode 14 of Bushcraft Basics. In last week's episode we focused on maintaining knives, and we had a look at a variety of knives, some of which you'll recognise that I've got here with me today, and we talked about different types of grinds and different types of metals, and really just applied a bit of a simple maintenance technique that you can use in the field along with some really simple items that you can carry with you. And keeping on top of maintenance is essential. If you can keep on top of maintenance, then you really will keep your edge in tip-top condition almost all of the time when you're working out in the field, and you'll very rarely let your knife get to a state where it needs to be put on the stone and re-ground to get that edge back so you can maintain it further. A little bit like this Mora here. This knife was given to me by a friend of mine. He wanted me to put an edge on it for him, or put an edge back on it, which it really does need. It's got past the point of where a strop can save it, because it's just not been maintained at all. It's been used and abused, and as a result the edge is rolled quite horribly, and there's lots of flat spots, lots of light reflecting back at me, and very blunt, very dull. I mean, I can run my finger across the belly repeatedly and it will not cut me at all. In this tub here in front of me I've got a Japanese whetstone, but this whetstone here is made by King, which is quite a popular make, and we've got a coarse side just here, we've got a very fine side just here. This is a 1000 grit side, and this is a 6000 grit side, so this is a finishing side, and this is really for taking off more material. For example, when we come to working with this knife, this Mora here, is going to have to be put on this side first and then finished on this side here. You can get finer sides than this, even finer finishing stones than 6000. You can go past 8000 in some respects, but really this is all that I kind of need, and this stone here can be stored in water and doesn't really need to be dried out. The stone is being stored in water at the moment because before we use it, it needs to be left in water for about 15 minutes to absorb lots of water and become totally saturated, which will obviously aid in its performance, will help it clean itself when we're sharpening it, and it will give us better results. So it's been in there for quite a while, and it can be actually taken out now and we can start to use it. And we'll start with this side just here. Before we actually do any sharpening and put our knife on the actual stone, we'll have a look at the stone itself and look at the condition. It may be an old stone that you've picked up, you may have bought a new one. Either way, it's good to just check it out. You can see the edges on this have been filed away, so there's no rises on the edge. Some stones you can buy straight out of the box can be higher on the edges than they are in the centre, and what happens is you put your knife down and as you drag it along, you see that material is being sort of filed away there and there, but actually not in the centre, and you don't want it to be like that. So most decent stones will be rounded off and have no rises in them, and they should be perfectly flat. But you can always check if they are perfectly flat as well, and regularly top a bit of water up on them as you work with them. And if you've got a stone that's kind of wavy, it's always good to level the stone off before you actually work with it, especially if you've got a big project of putting a good edge back on a knife. And you can do that just with another stone, and by rubbing the stone across the top of the whetstone like this, you'll see areas and depressions where water can gather, material can gather, and it will give you a good idea how flat the stone is. Now this one is perfectly flat and there's nothing that we really need to do with it at all, but if there was an area that had a depression, you would see material collect in it, a little bit like a divot. Another way is to get a pencil and you can draw like a grid all across the stone, and as you do this you'll see areas where the pencil is removed and areas where it isn't, and that'll tell you if there are rises and troughs in the actual stone. But this one looks good and it's ready to work with. So before we put the knife on the stone, we'll take a bit of water, put it on the whetstone, just top it up, and I'll do that pretty regularly throughout the process to stop it gumming up. Just make sure the surface is pretty flat. We've got a bit of rocking there, that's a bit better. And this is a Scandinavian grind. We've talked all about grinds in the last few episodes and different types of steels, so this will be a very easy one to sharpen. The bevel is very large and you'll see the bevel just sits quite flat. And at first I'm just going to rock it back and forth like this. And this is generally the way I start off. I mean, I'm doing the whole blade in this case, and I'm just keeping that bevel nice and flat. And on the push stroke I'm putting a lot of pressure, but when I come back I'm really just dragging it very lightly. I'm not trying to do anything at all apart from get back. There's another way of doing it really, or there's many ways, and this is just my technique that I'm sharing with you. And that's that you can obviously do this. And this is quite nice when you're using a Scandinavian grind on a large bevel. I just quite like doing this because it always just keeps that bevel nice and flat, and I'm trying to take a lot of material away. So at first I'll be using this technique. You can see that slurry building up, and there we have it. I mean, that's looking a lot better already, and some of this slurry here can be used to clean the rest of the blade with your fingers. But really, there's no set amount of strokes that we're actually going to use here. There's not 20 times this way, 30 times this way. It's about looking at the blade. It's about looking at that edge and seeing what's happening to it. And that's really the key to sharpening things properly, is looking at the edge. You only really want to do as much as you need to get it back to where it was. You can see we've still got a bit of a nasty roll there, so it's still going to need some more work. So I might put a bit more water on and carry on the other side, just dragging towards myself. You can always tilt the knife like this in this case to follow that angle, so you're sharpening all of the edge. And we can always take a softer approach later when we've got quite a lot of material off. Just have a look at it again. Yeah, I mean, it's getting better, but it still needs a lot of work. Getting there. It's looking a lot better. We'll just keep going with it. Once all the light's gone, I'll change sides, but until then, keep going. Time to focus a bit more on that belly now, because that's the part of the blade that's in the worst condition. The flat of the blade is quite nice now. Cleaning the blade with a cloth really helps, or else all the particles from the stone make it difficult to see the edge, but we've really improved that considerably. You can see that it's a very clean edge. That stone has just polished it up perfectly, and we can put it on the finishing stone very soon. And I'm just really going to run my finger across it, see if there's any rough spots. There's one just there. You can feel a rough spot, as you go across. You just feel it very slightly, but the belly feels really good now. It was horrific before. I'm just cleaning it on my fleece here because this is a pretty old fleece and I don't really mind, but I use a rag when I'm at home, a bit of kitchen towel or something. You've got a tiny bit of reflection coming back. It could do with just a few more passes on this coarse side here, and then we'll be ready to switch over. And there was just a coarse spot there. The better the blade becomes from this process, the more you see it slicing material away from the stone. The sound changes as well. The more used to all of this you get, the more you can really start to understand what's happening just from feel and sight and sound, and you stop thinking about angles and worrying about all these little things, and it just becomes quite a sort of encapsulating process really that you can start to enjoy. There we go, I think that's probably it there. Yeah, that is beautiful. That's looking really good. So much better than it looked before. So we can flip the stone over now. Just going to give that a clean actually. And again, with this side here, we can just take this stone here and just check out the level and actually clean it as well. This can take away all the metal fragments that get lodged in the stone and clean the stone up a bit. And we can see if we've got any rises and troughs. In fact, I can see a trough just there where a lot of the material's collecting. It's a little bit like plastering a wall. The cavities pick up the sludge whilst the rest of it kind of slips away. So that's looking pretty good though. It's nice and flat. A little bit more water. And onto the finishing side now. Oh wow, look at that metal coming off. So these black marks here, the metal actually coming off of the blade. Obviously a bit of dirt as well, but there we go. Feels completely different to the other side. It's almost like you're running it across some marble. This is really honing it in now. So with a Scandinavian grind, this is all a pretty straightforward process. The grind is all predetermined. It's quite a large bevel. It sits on the stone really easily. And I'm not doing this a set amount of times. It's just all really just looking at the edge and inspecting it every now and then. And I think we're pretty much done here. And the belly might need a bit of attention. Look at that. That is perfect. So the edge of my thumb here has got quite a lot of calluses on. If we run the knife just along the edge of my thumb, you'll see it's taking off quite a lot of skin there. Not exactly the most pleasant way of testing it, but we'll put this on the strop now and just finish it off a little bit, and that'll be it. Be nice and sharp. I've got a little block of wood here, and this would simulate the edge of a table, which is often the way I work. And we had a look at stropping in last week's episode. Very easy to do. And that should probably be about it. That polishing stone on the whetstone there would have done a lot of work for us. And we can see now that that is a beautiful edge. So compared to the way it was before, this is now shaving sharp. You can see it's taking off quite a lot of hair there, and that would be a beautiful edge to use and can be maintained very easily. So with a whetstone, it's a nice grind really, and knife to work with. Can be maintained very easily in the field now. So the way in which we use this whetstone, which made very easy work of this Mora knife here, we can use this Spyderco double stuff stone in almost exactly the same way. It's sort of like a scaled down version that's field friendly in a respect. And if push comes to shove, this can be used. It doesn't need to be soaked like the Spyderco stone, but every now and then it will need to be cleaned in that respect, just to help it perform properly, which can be done by wiping it, even using a little bit of oil that you bring out with you in the field. Most of the time this is just a honing stone for me. If I see an area that needs a bit of attention in the field, it can be used quite easily just on this side, just to take out things that perhaps stropping can't, so when something gets too bad, but that's very rare. It's always a real trade-off really when you're out in the field in some respects, because you can't carry all this heavy gear with you to make life comfortable sometimes. But you've got here really the same thing, just a field-friendly version. So if you are going to use a stone like this in the field, and you do have to, probably best just focus on the portion of the blade that needs that attention. So on this it was more of the belly that needed some work, so I'd focus more on that part of the blade to actually get it back to shaving sharp. This knife here is made of a much harder steel than the O1 carbon steel. It's a powdered stainless, and as a result it's got a much smaller grind on it to suit that type of steel. The difficulty is unlike the Scandi, you can't just sit it on the actual stone and find the bevel really easily, and some people get very concerned about angles. If you have got a knife like this and the edge is in absolute tatters, you can choose your own angle, because you'll be re-grinding it anyway. So by using a coarse stone you will determine that angle, and then hopefully, given that you've created the angle, you can follow suit and actually get the edge you're looking for. But if you're just tidying something up, for example, which is in the most common cases, say there's a roll or something, which is pretty unlikely for this steel, but if there was, we really needed to tidy it up and it had to go on the stone, we could use this finishing stone here to help get that out. Maybe we can't find the angle, just clean the blade there. And a tip you can use at home is just to get a pen and just draw a line along the edge like that. And it just helps you see whether you're actually taking off the material that's required. If we start like that really shallow and do this, there's no way we're going to be taking any of that ink off. But if we start like this, which I know that is a much more in tune angle to the edge, then the ink is all gone, because that sort of angle there is really what you're looking for. If you are working with full flats like this, maybe you've got an SE knife, a lot of those have full flats, then worrying about the angles can always be a bit of a big deal. But there's the key really, the key's in maintaining that edge that you already have. And as you maintain it, you strop it, you look after it in the field, you use a honing stone like the Spyderco double stuff stone to take out anything that might be a little bit too much for the strop to handle. You'll always be maintaining that edge you have, and the angles will never change, and there'll never be a worry. If you have to bring it onto a stone because it's in tatters, then you can use a pen to just find out whether you're holding it at the right angle. Another way obviously is putting it on the stone and looking at it very closely and seeing where the light disappears at the actual edge, but that can be a little bit more tricky with such a small bevel there, and if you're in dark light then it can be even trickier. So the key is really to just maintenance on all of these things, and maintenance is really the way to go on your axes, on your knives, on your saws as well. But my advice to you would just be, if you're new to bushcraft and you're buying yourself a knife, you've already talked about getting a knife, and it was the Mora heavy duty, this one here, a really easy knife to look after, not expensive, and a great one to just practice with. And you know, people with a lot of experience carry these all over the world. As I say in other videos, I've got friends of mine who are instructors and they still use these after, you know, tens of years of using knives out in the field. They use this one here because it is a fantastic knife with a very good heat treat. Being inexpensive, you can do all the things you want to do with it, and in the back of your mind you don't have that worry. A lot of these other knives are just sentimental really, because people like myself and other people have a hand in the design process and can see it being made, as I did with a lot of these ones here in the actual workshops. So put knife to stone, have some practice, and it'll all become clear, and with a Scandi grind it's really easy anyway. But I hope this video helped out. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in any of the links in the description or any other information, do have a look at the description, and I'll see you very soon in another episode. Take care guys, and thanks again.